It's In the Field Radio, y'all.
Everything's real in the field.
On 91.3 FM, WVKR.
What's up, y'all? It's Erin Boogie, and I'm excited to bring you a brand new interview. I know it's been a while, and I've had this one in the cut for quite some time, and I'm glad to finally share it with you. I stumbled upon an article about the Archive of Contemporary Music and Chronogram back in the spring, and I couldn't believe we had something so cool in our own backyard. I reached out to Bob George, and he agreed to come on the show and discuss the archive and their quest for a new home. Right now, they are housed in a former piggery on hotelier Andre Balazs' estate in Staatsburg, but the location is zoned agricultural, so there's only so much they can do with the space that they're in right now. That means that the bulk of their more than 3 million sound recordings are currently sitting in boxes on pallets, and the archive is currently, once again, left looking for a new location after previously moving up here from New York City. But the good news is that they plan to stay local to the area. Specifically, they would like to stay in Poughkeepsie, but definitely looking to stay in the Hudson Valley. They would really like to find a building and open some sort of center for the public in conjunction with the archive that would incorporate conferences, spaces for live music, dance, DJing, and more. So fingers crossed for that, because that would be phenomenal for the area, especially if Poughkeepsie could land something like that. That could be some sort of like destination type thing for the area that we don't have right now. So I hope you enjoy this interview as much as I did, because I just couldn't believe that we had something so amazing right here in the Hudson Valley. So let's get into it. Welcome back. I'm Erin Boogie. I'm here with Bob George at the Archive of Music, and we're actually here on site, which is really cool. We don't always get to do this. And I want to start back at the beginning, because the Archive of Music was founded about 40 years ago. And I'm just in awe of how you had the foresight of starting to compile records, because, okay, I want to touch on this before we dive into it. I always feel like we should be compiling physical copies of things in case the grid goes down. But you had the foresight to start doing that almost 40 years ago, before the grid was even a thing. Streaming was not even a thing. And you decided to start compiling 2 of each record all those years ago. So what made you have the foresight to start doing that?
Well, I'm not sure it was foresight. It's just that, first of all, hi. Because I had done a lot of strange, different things, somewhat related to the recording industry, everybody was giving me records. I had put out a very early experimental record called Airwaves, which was the first time the word performance art was used in 1977. Then I started working with, a little bit before that, and at the same time, with a young artist named Laurie Anderson. We were both teaching together at for the Whitney Museum. And then I was working on Laurie's stage show for many years. And then I put out Laurie's first recording, Oh Superman. And because I was, at the same time, I had put out a book on the first book, discography on punk music called Volume, and then a DJ in London named John Peel picked it up and said, why don't you come start doing radio shows with me? So everybody was giving me records for different reasons. One, they wanted me to produce something. 2, they wanted to be in the next version of the book because they had done something, or they wanted me to play their record on the radio. I had 47,000 records. Then what to do with them? So I tried to give them away, and nobody was interested. I tried Library of Congress. I tried the Smithsonian, Columbia, NYU, New York Public. Nobody was interested, because what I had was punk, reggae, hip-hop, and experimental. And most of the people in 1985 were focusing on classical or a little bit of ethnic music, what they were calling ethnic music at the time, or folk music, and Broadway. And all of the things that I was interested in really didn't, they wanted the experimental stuff. They thought that was great, but they didn't want the other stuff. And if you sort of roll those all together now, punk, hip-hop, reggae, and experimental, and that's what we're doing now, isn't it? I mean, it sort of feels that way.
Yeah, I mean, hip hop at the time was just in its infancy. So, what were some of the hip hop groups that were even on the cusp at the time?
Well, it was mostly okay. I lived in Lower Manhattan, and so there were 5 clubs in that area. This is around 1977. So punk and hip hop are parallel movements. It was really exciting because you would go to Tier 3 or a club downtown, and you would run up to Harlem or the Bronx to hear Kool Herc. That was my main person I was interested in at the time because of the Jamaican influence and roots. And then you could go to Studio 54, and after that you could go over to the Lower East Side to an after-hours club. So all of those things were going on at the same time. I think like 1977 was like the apogee of like when to listen to music or be involved in the music scene. So yeah, it really was mostly, again, the big star at the time was Africa Bambaataa, right? Just both in stature and clothing and attitude and music, and then the mixing that went on, Run DMC, and then it wasn't that I was never really involved in the scene, but an observer of all this stuff that was going on at the same time. It was all equally interesting. I mean, it was just exciting. I mean, one night at Studio 54, I got to dance with Grace Jones and Diana Ross. So, I mean, as a kid, this was pretty exciting. So.
But it's exciting for me now to hear about. Like, you were really there for the beginning of it when, like you hear about African Bambaataa or like that's the beginning. That's the birth of hip hop.
Yeah. It's really funny too, because one of my best friends from college turns out to be Bill Altman, who was the publicist for Def Jam. So it's like all these different connections. So we just started meeting so many different people. And also you have to remember, at that time, nobody was famous. And so people all hung out. There were very few places to eat in Lower Manhattan. So like Dave's Lunch on the corner of Canal and Broadway. Canal and Broadway, sorry. So, you'd see Iggy Pop. You'd see, I think, Lou Reed for the first time. And you'd just see Fred Schneider, the B-52s. You'd see these people hanging out, having something to eat at 4 a.m. So that was sort of what was going on. It was incredibly interesting, and like I said, no one had a handler, and they were keeping you from talking to them. So that really made it very nice. And you can't imagine that now with people if they've gotten a certain stature.
So everybody was very accessible at the time.
Yeah, everybody. I mean, nobody really snubbed you because they didn't know if you would be important one day. Maybe it's very, very funny.
So the 47,000 records that you had when you started the archive started in a loft.
Yeah, our joke is we couldn't afford a loft in Soho because it was $100 a month. So I settled for 3,000 square feet for $68 a month, and that's sort of how it started. And it was right near. Again, I'd come to New York as a student of a scholarship from the Whitney Museum, an art student, and that was on Reed Street, and so I found a place on Chambers Street, so it was very nearby. But again, the city was bankrupt. It was very exciting. Gunfights in the street. They were just finished building Tribeca. What didn't have a name yet. It was called Washington Market. Everything had been gutted to build the World Trade Center, so there was hardly any businesses there, and all these buildings were abandoned. They weren't zoned. They weren't zoned for residences. So all the artists were taking over lofts and living in them, paying rent, doing it legally. They weren't squatters, but basically everything. It was all DIY. You had to fix everything up yourself because the landlords weren't willing to put any money into it. So then, that's why the city then granted you status to stay there because you'd done all the work to make it livable. So it was pretty darn exciting. That's what was great about it. And it was also that the people don't realize how much integrated people in the experimental world were with rock at the time. So you had a lot of people like Glenn Branca and people who, Reese Chatham, who were almost parallels to Phil Glass in terms of they were all working with similar ideas about overtones and psychoacoustic music and making large clusters of sound, and would be in performance spaces. And there was the kitchen, which was a meeting ground, a venue that was a meeting ground for both rock people, experimental musicians, classical musicians who were going in different directions, so like Lamont Young. And it was very, very exciting time.
But even your launch party was epic, like right off the bat. It was at the Storied Limelight, and you had a host of celebrities come through. What was that like?
Well, it was great. I think, again, somewhere we had Run DMC, we had Susanna Vega, we had incredible people hosting it and bringing other people in, like William Burroughs and, like I said, Bill Murray, and it was just very exciting. But the best thing that happened was that somebody we didn't know came and stayed the whole night, and that was Nile Rodgers. And so Nile just watched everybody, and he just came up to us and said, "This is really cool. I'd like to help." And that really got. And Niall then introduced us to David Bowie, and I'd already known Lou Reed, and so we put together a board of people. And we really, that first party, again, Bombada was there, and Doc Palmas, who wrote thousands of beautiful songs. Our first board member was John Hammond, the legendary producer who went from Billie Holiday to Bob Dylan. So all of these people were just so interested in the idea that we were trying to save everything. It had no particular focus, and that we were trying to do it in its own time as the music was emerging. And that's really important because you have a better chance of getting things that are now rare. I mean, a Misfits record at $7,000 is quite hard for anybody to want, let alone afford. So it really happens in that way, that everybody passed us on from one person to another, and that's how we got our board together and got our first basis for keeping it alive.
They've all become pretty instrumental throughout the lifespan of the archive too. Yeah. So they were there from the beginning, but they became instrumental throughout.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is, of course, we're all getting older and passing on, as they say, and but like Keith Richards has endowed his blues collection for 33 years now. I mean, that's really quite remarkable. So we really appreciate that kind of help. And now, because we're looking for a major new space to relocate and open it up more to the public, but more as a research organization. Because right now, it doesn't, who cares if you have all this stuff, right? You have to have some use for it that puts it out there. But like you had hinted at, we're convinced that we do a lot of work with the Internet Archive in San Francisco, who do a lot of our digitization for us. We have a back and forth about which is going to last longer, and we think that anything mechanical has a better chance of surviving than anything digital. And we see that already happening with CDs, where they oxidize, they have other problems, but the main problem is the players won't be made. And like I said, one of our jokes is if you have a rubber band, a bicycle wheel, a bundle of sewing needles, and a cone of paper, I can play an LP. But I can't make a chip. And I don't think anyone will be able to make a chip. And the CD players are disappearing. And tray players are, really wonky. There's a lot of kinds of problems to deal with anything that's mechanical.
You touched on research. I wanted to ask you because, going through the highlights that you have on your website, it's tough to narrow down the ones I wanted to touch on, because over the last 40 years, there's been so many things that I wanted to ask about. But you had research memberships offered to the recording and publishing industry. Tommy Boy Records became our first research member, looking for authoritative information to assist in locating rights for sampling used in creating hip-hop recordings. That was in October of 86. Mm-hmm. So you guys were on the forefront of helping Tommy Boy with sampling in the beginning. Because,
sampling was becoming, little by little, it was really getting expensive. I mean, the Beastie Boys, we recorded stuff, they did it so that they could sample themselves. I mean, it's always been a deterrent. Some people, like, James Brown, wanted it to happen because it made put him back in the public focus. Some people, of course, it was a downfall of people like, 9/9 Records, and so many things had big problems because you could never afford the cost of sampling, and a lot of the artists or the bigger companies were jumping on it as a source of income, and a lot of people were using it and being much more generous because it would make them reemerge into the musical world from old material. So, yeah, it was people like Tom Silverman. They was like really just very nice to us, and we did the same thing with a lot of the smaller labels at the time, you know. So, and I had also done I worked out of the Rough Trade office in London when I was there, and so we just knew everybody, and it was by accident. We weren't, like I said, we weren't famous. I wasn't famous. It's just that, you know, it would be people like, you know, X-Ray Specs would come in and give you a record and say, could you play it on the radio? And so it was like really quite remarkable that we got involved with so many people. The same thing with working with Martin Scorsese, that he just comes to us and says, I need this. Or we worked on all of Jonathan Demme's films. And in fact, we used a really, really obscure group of recordings from the Pratts, which was a 13 and 14-year-old kids in England who'd done a few records. And they're at the opening of, I think, Manchurian Candidate. So his version of that movie. So it's really exciting to put things that aren't current or well known into the world again, so that people can rediscover them.
What's your favorite piece?
No such thing. Yeah, we actually want to do something called the greatest record ever made, which could be different every week, but I guess it doesn't matter. But I'm more interested in a record that you play all the time, consistently for 5 days straight, and 200 times a day. Those are the things that interest me. And there are some that have been like that. There's one, but they're so obscure and preposterous, right? You know, like a very long, early combination Juju Afrobeat record by Deli Abiodun. Anyway, so that's one of them. But also Lions After Slumber by Scritti Politti, something that I've played over and over again. Only One You by Melody Beecher. I mean, these are, you know, discoveries because I'm pulling from 3 million records. So it's really not that, you know, I hate to say this, but I heard my first Led Zeppelin record a couple weeks ago. Because
First?
Well, I was in India in 70, 71, and after that I never got a television, and so I don't know anything about Welcome Back Kotter or anything. So you miss a lot, and you focus on what you love and what's maybe not. Jeff Travis at Rough Trade said, when I brought him Laurie's record, Oh Superman, he says, Bob, you have absolutely no pop sensibilities. And it's true. I have no understanding of Elton John or regular rock and roll. So it's always been obscure, sort of. Not obscure, but just the things you grew up with. Because I went to school in Ann Arbor, and so who were the house bands? It was the MC5, Iggy, the Stooges. I mean, a little bit of Bob Seger, Commander Cody. Those were things that, you know, at the time in 67, 68, they weren't mainstream at all. But, you know, and so John Sinclair just died, who was the head of the Rainbow People's Party in Ann Arbor, and the White Panther Party, and the SDS and the Weathermen, and it was a very exciting time. So, you know, if I like the Bee Gees record, you know, that I would like the Bee Gees, it's like the Odessa record, which has got a red velvet cover, and it's fairly, they were not a disco band at the time, but a very much on the edge experimental band.
But it's nice to have someone also to protect the obscure. There's plenty of people that out there that have the Elton John records, right? You know,
I heard that that's true. I mean, you know, I've heard him in elevators. I mean, you know, I've heard the titles, but you know, it's not like that isn't where I go to discover. I mean, you know, like Fred and Tim here, who, I mean, Fred knows every single in the world. He knows everything about R&B and early blues and things like that. Has a much wider knowledge on certain things, whereas my interest would be in experimental music, punk music, and African music, and a little bit of Colombian and Brazilian. But because we have 25,000 Brazilian records, so we really I focus and go after certain things, and I've gone after Indian sound recordings. I'm still looking for Beatles 78, produced in 1972 in India.
And you guys have how many Beatles records?
Oh, I don't know. Did we ever count them? I don't think so.
I thought it said on the website there was like 700 or something like that.
Oh, yeah, that's how many we've cataloged, but there's lots more.
There's more?
I think we have like 40 or 50, just the White Albums, different, which we keep trying to get a lower number. And we helped with the guy who's done that White Album. What's it called? I Buy White Albums. And that's a really great project too, to see them all together. But we'll show you something that's really incredibly stupid and obscure. Is a edition of TV Guide in honor of the White Album, which is all white on the front, which is like, to me, so bizarre that people would do that. But and that people would know what it is. But Beatles records, these are all commodities if you want to talk about money, and we don't sell things unless it's a third copy, so we're not really interested. But it's so amazing how people think that Beatles records are worth a lot, but almost all of them aren't, because they made so many of them. So we're sort of very interested in something that's unique if we can find it, and that we get donated so much stuff. It's maybe 100,000, 150,000 a year, and every 100 sound recordings we get in a box of, let's say, 100 LPs, maybe 2 are interesting to us because they're a better version of what we already have, or there's something we've never seen before. And that's why people with real knowledge, like Fred and Tim, they'll go through a bunch of singles and say, oh yeah, this is $1,200. Oh, this is like, things I've never heard of in my life, right? And or good ideas. We work for Ang Lee on the film Taking Woodstock, and find an obscure record that supposedly was the first person to perform at Woodstock. We didn't know we had the records. We had 5 albums. So it's like discovery for us. The exciting thing is discovering new stuff, or stuff we've never heard of. We just started a fascist collection here, and we're collecting records by Adolf Hitler and Mussolini. So, it has that kind of, and we also have a kaiju collection, so we're going after Japanese monster movie film soundtracks. So everything that we like, somebody else already collects and has a working knowledge of it that's far beyond what we do. I think what's good about what we do is it's very broad.
Do you listen to everything that gets donated?
1 out of 10,000, yeah, maybe. If I'm lucky. I'm a petty bureaucrat. I used to be involved in music, and now I'm trying to keep a place alive. It's very different. My joke is I say I could run a small town in China, 30 million.
Yeah, talk about moving out of New York City and coming up here to Staatsburg.
It was both. It was a nightmare. That's all. Yeah, because it was I think it was 31 days, 30 vans.
Oh my God!
Every day we had to have everything ready to go up the next day. It was easy to get out of the city because of the pandemic, because there was not much traffic. It was hard to do because all of our help vanished. We had lots of students helping from NYU and Columbia, and just from the neighborhood, but they lost their dorms. And they closed the dorms down, so the kids had to go home. So we were sort of left with just a skeleton crew trying to pack it all up in time. That was the real hard part. And then, it was expensive. But we had everything here, and it's on pallets, and it hasn't been unpacked since. So it's been over 3.5 years now. So that's our biggest fear, is we worry a little bit about the compression on the boxes. We think we pack them pretty well, but we really need to get them on the shelves again. Because we don't, everything new that's come in, when I say we get 150,000 a year, much more if you count CDs, which we don't. Because, it's just, you can't love a CD, right? Album is like a puppy size, right? The CD is like an insect size. You can't fall in love with a CD. And so, the idea is that we hope to get them on the shelves for the first time, and to see what we have, because we have not been able to do anything about what comes in new, because we don't know if we already have it, and we don't know the condition of the ones we already have. So the real goal is to finally get them on shelves again. And the way we do it is we don't pay attention to any genre. They're just alphabetical by artist. And that becomes really exciting too, because you just find out, again, so much stuff that you wouldn't maybe look at if it was in a focused collection. Although we do keep if somebody endows or donates a specific group of things that part of the donation insists that they remain together, then we'll do that, But then we'll try to get the duplicate and put it in the in file.
Yeah, you said it was Keith Richards that had endowed
Yeah.
his collection. So, like, does that have to stay together?
Yeah.
Okay.
We'd like it to, because it's Keith Richards. Right? I mean, we're going to diss the guy? I mean, come on. It's really, really wonderful stuff, too. And it's really one we've really, spend his money well and make sure we get things. And, we're looking to get a guitar and have that signed and put in the room. We have a room dedicated to that now here in this space. I'll show it to you.
Yeah.
But it's, the whole goal is to just, we want everything. We want everything except classical, which we think enough other institutions do a really great job, and it's not really necessary, but we do really go after experimental new music within the classical genre. And one of the great collections we just got was from John Rockwell, who was legendary critic for the New York Times for dance and music for many years, and so he was privy to all that was happening in that semi-classical modern scene and collected all this incredible recordings. So one of the gems we got from his collection was from Charlemagne Palestine. He was Phil Glass's roommate at one time, and we got all the stuff from Phil's first label, which was called Chatham Square Records, and so Charlemagne's things, and they're priceless. They're very small runs, and we just love that kind of stuff. The fact that when people, a good example is Laurie's, like, this record, "Oh Superman," was given to everybody in the recording industry, every big wig, and they all just said this. It's like, well, because it's it's the Inagata Davida of the art world, right? It's 8 minutes long, and nobody was interested in putting it out or supporting it. So Laurie was signed to a British label, signed to British Warners, and so it's all because of John Peel. John Peel played the record. The next day, it was number 2 in the country, and that's it, and then until recently, when after Laurie hadn't recorded for a long time, the label, she comes back to get signed by Non-Such. So again, a division of Warner Brothers here in America. But that's just it. I mean, people, we save everything, so we could say we're on top of every trend that ever happened. It's just like...
It seems that way.
Well, it doesn't matter if we save everything. Of course we knew about it, right? I mean, if you have Harvard starting a hip-hop collection in 2007, it's kind of like not jumping on the bandwagon, right? I mean, it's not that we move faster than anybody else. We just do everything, so we don't care. Quality means nothing, because you never know what's going to have value or usefulness in the future. It's very hard to judge things in your own time.
Especially being, the research services that you guys provide, or where someone who's using obscure music in a film,
right? Like,
they might see value where someone else didn't.
Yeah, I mean, the music supervisors are pretty good, and they only come to us when they're stuck, just to have stuff. Like there's a book by Tashin called Art Record Covers, and again, they needed 200 things, and we had them all. And these are really strange, odd things, But again, that's how you learn. I didn't know that Matisse is doing drawings of Ella Fitzgerald. You know what I mean? It's great. You think of them as like one's really old and one's kind of new and jazzy, but their lives overlap. And so it all adds to learning a little bit, because I'm not a record collector at all. I mean, I had things to use, and I know nothing about music. I know a little bit about the recordings and the recording industry, so it's quite different, And our interest, like I said, is to making sure we can try to preserve as much as possible and keep it together. I think that's the main thing. That I feel bad when somebody has spent their life building a collection and then it has to be sold off. So that's really something we really try to focus on, and getting people to do more and more things like that. So, like Jonathan Demme he had a very strong interest in Haitian music and Haitian culture. And so he put together a little Haitian collection for us. So, and that a lot of that stuff all disappeared now too. Haiti's gone through troubled times, and just like a lot of places that the music disappears because it's being sold off or left. I mean, I traveled through West Africa and would see outside of Decca, West Africa, just mountains of records sitting in the sun.
Wow.
Because they didn't sell.
Yeah.
Or because it's like music here, it's trendy. You like certain things for a certain amount of time, and then you move on to something else, because a generation turns over very quickly. You know, you're 12 and your 7-year-old sister likes something else that you don't like. So that happens a lot, and we saw that a lot in Jamaica and West Africa, things like that. Although in Jamaica, the Japanese come in and bought everything. so it's very, very different.
Erin Boogie here. As you can hear, we didn't get a chance to properly close out the interview, so I just want to give you a couple places where you can check out the archive of contemporary music online. Their Instagram is ARC-NYC, so it's ARC-NYC. They have some cool stuff on there, so definitely check that out. And you can check them out on their website, which is arcmusic.org. And it also gives you a couple reference points where you can donate to the Archive of Contemporary Music. So you can definitely give them a monetary donation, which can help their cause, especially right now where they're trying to fundraise to find a new home. But they also give you an outline on their website of how to donate materials. You can check them out on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram as well. So make sure you check out their website. That's where you'll find the most information. Check them out on social media, but just check them out. It's such a cool thing that we have here.
Welcome back to In the Field Radio. You know what I'm about to do. Make sure you follow In the Field Radio. Write to me. Tell me what you think. Do song requests. You know what I'm saying? Talk to me. Do shout outs. If you write to me in the DMs, I'm going to read it. And I'm going to do what you tell me to do. Boss me around. I like that stuff. At In the Field Radio on everything. All right. I'm about to get out of here. Big thank you and I love you to anybody that's rocking with us. All our loyal listeners. Love you guys.